That morning, a closed-off street on the outskirts of Newark was already buzzing with the chaos of the weekend flea market. The sound of vendors shouting their deals, kids running between stalls, and the aroma of hot dogs and fried dough mixed with the damp, gritty smell of the city pavement. Among the crowd, a young woman, maybe 20, pushed a squeaky, overflowing shopping cart filled with heavy-duty trash bags bulging with cans and plastic bottles. Her hoodie was stained and frayed, her face smudged with grime, and her hair was tied back in a messy knot. People knew her only as Ray, the young canner who was always seen around the market. Not many knew her story. Ray always showed up before dawn and left just as the streetlights flickered on. She rarely spoke, just kept her head down and worked. But beneath that simple exterior, there was something different in the way she watched people, in her steady, measured steps, and in the sharp, focused gaze she had when she spotted something suspicious. That day, the market's atmosphere was a little tense. Several vendors were whispering about two patrol officers who often came by, not to keep the peace, but to shake down the small-time sellers. Yesterday, Harding shook down Manny for $20, just 'cause his stall was supposedly blocking the sidewalk, muttered a vegetable vendor. It's just a small tarp on the ground, added another. Ray heard it all without a word. She continued sorting plastic bottles by the curb, but inside, something was starting to boil. She had already memorized the faces of the two cops. Officer Kyle Harding and Officer Ben Russo, already infamous around the market for their arrogant swagger. As noon approached, the two officers showed up again. Their patrol cruiser stopped right in the middle of the market street, and they hit the siren for a second as if they were conducting a major raid. People immediately went quiet. Some pretended to be busy, others just moved away. "Hey, this setup is blocking the street," Harding barked at a fruit vendor. "Sorry, officer. Just for a bit, I'll tidy it up," the vendor replied nervously. "Careful. You said that last time. Now, if you want to stay safe, you know the drill," Harding said, tapping his pocket, giving a crystal-clear signal. The vendor, his face resigned, slipped a few folded bills into Harding's hand. Russo, Harding's partner, just chuckled softly as he scanned the area. "It's standard, man. You don't want trouble, you just pay," he said, his gaze landing on Ray, who was collecting bottles not far from them. Their eyes met for a moment. Russo sneered. "Hey, look at this." The canner. "What, you selling loose cigarettes in there? This cart's a public hazard." He kicked the cart's squeaky wheel. Ray stayed quiet, holding herself back. "Sorry, officer. I'm just taking the empty bottles," she said softly. "Taking? This is a public space. You're in the way. If you want to be safe, you should pay for protection too," Harding chimed in, his tone dripping with condescension. A few people started to watch, but no one dared to speak up. They knew that crossing cops like Harding could lead to bigger problems. But that day didn't go as they expected. Ray looked at them for a long moment. She didn't get openly angry, but her eyes held a cold tension. "I don't have any money, officer. But if you bother me again, I'll report you," she said firmly. The air went still. Russo laughed, mocking her. "Report us? To who? Who do you think you are? A homeless canner with an attitude?" Harding clapped Russo on the shoulder. "Come on, leave her. She'll probably be gone by tomorrow anyway." The two left with dismissive laughter, leaving Ray to bend down and pick up her things again. But beneath her calm expression, something in her face had changed. It wasn't the face of a weak girl, but of someone calculating their next move. That night, Ray sat in her cramped, low-rent studio. She turned on a small lamp, opened an old canvas bag, and pulled out a burner smartphone with a cracked screen. On it, an encrypted messaging app displayed messages from a contact named LT. Price. LT. Price. Target visually confirmed. Ray, yes. Two officers extorting vendors. Location. Liberty Street Market. LT. Price. Good. Make sure we get them red-handed. But don't make a scene yet. Ray understood. Waiting for the right moment. Ray stared at the screen for a long time before putting the phone away. She took a deep breath. Everything she had been doing, living undercover as a canner, blending in with the working poor, wasn't out of necessity. It was an assignment. She was an undercover officer with the Internal Affairs Division, assigned to investigate reports of corruption and extortion within the department itself. For 3 months, she had lived with this fake identity, enduring insults and pretending to be invisible. But tonight, she knew her cover was almost over. She just needed one more moment. The moment they let their guard down. The next morning, the market was busy again. But Ray was no longer just collecting cans. Under her frayed jacket, a tiny body camera was hidden, and a miniature earpiece connected her directly to her team, parked in an unmarked van a few blocks away. She knew they would come again today. And sure enough, around 11 a.m., the sound of the cruiser returned. Officer Harding and Russo arrived with the same style, sunglasses on, power tripping. They stopped in front of the fruit vendor they had shaken down yesterday. "Well, where's today's contribution?" Harding demanded. The vendor trembled. "Officer, I already gave you $20 yesterday." $20? For 2 cops? You nuts. Russo shot back, staring the vendor down. Ray watched from a distance. Her hand trembled slightly, holding back her anger. She glanced down at the small camera on her chest, making sure it was all being recorded. Then, something they didn't expect happened. Ray approached them with a calm stride. "Officer, leave him alone," she said flatly. Harding looked at her, annoyed. "You again? The canner thinks she's a hero? You want to resist an officer," he said, shoving Ray's shoulder. Her cart wobbled, bottles clattering to the pavement. A few people gasped, but no one dared to intervene. Ray stared hard at Harding. "I said, leave him alone," she repeated, this time with a cold, different tone. Russo laughed. "Or what? You gonna report us to who?" "The mayor." Ray didn't answer. Instead, her hand slowly reached into her jacket pocket. She pulled out something that made both officers' faces turn pale. A small, standard-issue service pistol, pointed steadily at Harding's chest. The vendors and shoppers froze. The usually chaotic market fell dead silent. Harding was speechless, his face draining of color. Who the hell are you?" he stammered. Ray looked him straight in the eye, unflinching. "My name is Officer Rachel Hernandez, Internal Affairs Division. And you two are officially under arrest for extortion and abuse of authority." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. A few people spontaneously started to clap softly, while others covered their mouths in disbelief. Harding tried to back away, but from the end of the street, 4 uniformed IAD officers appeared, quickly securing the scene. Russo tried to make a break for it, but Ray kicked her shopping cart, sending it crashing into his legs. He fell, and within seconds, his hands were cuffed behind his back. Harding's face was beet red. "Damn it. So you were undercover this whole time?" Ray looked at him coldly. "That's right. And every shakedown you've pulled is on video." She lowered her weapon slowly, signaling her team to take the 2 officers to the van. After the arrest of the 2 dirty cops, the atmosphere at the Liberty Street Market changed dramatically. The residents, who were once afraid, now began to talk openly. Several vendors even cried with relief as they watched Harding and Russo being put into the van in handcuffs. Ray stood in the middle of the crowd, still wearing her frayed jacket. There was no victorious smile on her face, just a deep, empty stare. She knew her job wasn't over. This was just the surface of a much bigger problem. The IAD van left, and one by one, the vendors started to approach her. "Ma'am. Officer Ray. Thank you so much. We really thought you were just a canner," said an older woman who sold vegetables, smiling shyly. Ray just gave a small nod. "I'm just doing my job, ma'am. Please don't tell anyone about this, okay? There's still more I have to do." The woman nodded and then gave Ray a quick, gentle hug. "Be careful, dear. There are a lot more cops like them. They don't like people who fight back." Ray managed a thin smile and walked away. But in her head, the woman's words echoed, "They don't like people who fight back." A restless night. That evening, in the temporary IAD field office, the atmosphere was tense. Lieutenant Price, a man in his 50s with a hard face and experienced eyes, stared at a laptop screen displaying the footage from Ray's operation. "Good work, Hernandez," he said flatly. But the situation just got complicated. "We got intel that Harding and Russo aren't small fish. There's a big name behind them." Ray looked at him seriously. "What name, Lieutenant?" "We can't confirm it 100% yet. But the financial reports from their precinct show a steady flow of funds into several accounts, including one belonging to Deputy Chief Frank Donovan." Ray frowned. She knew that name. Donovan, a high-ranking official at headquarters, had always been known for his clean record. But among intel circles, rumors had long circulated that he had his own network controlling the shakedowns in the city's informal economy. "If this is true," Price continued, "then you just kicked a hornet's nest. And they're definitely going to be looking for you." Ray was silent for a moment. She had known the risks from the start. But hearing a name that big changed the game. "What's our next move, sir?" "You're being pulled. You need to rest. We'll take over the follow-up investigation." Ray looked at him, disagreeing. "With all due respect, Lieutenant, I can't stop now. I'm already too deep on the street." "That's an order, Hernandez," Price cut her off, his voice firm. "We don't want you becoming a target. Do you understand?" Ray finally nodded slowly. But in her heart, she knew she wouldn't stay quiet. A dark morning. 2 days later, Ray returned to her small studio in the Ironbound district. She tried to go about her day as usual. But since dawn, she'd felt something was off. Twice, she saw a black sedan with no plates stop down the street from her building. That night, she heard footsteps in the alley behind her building. Ray shut off the lights, moved to the window, and peeked through a crack in the blinds. 2 men in civilian clothes were standing across the street in front of a vacant building, talking quietly and smoking. From their posture, they weren't locals. Ray took a deep breath, took her backup piece from a drawer, and tucked it into the waistband of her jeans. She knew it wasn't just a feeling. She was being hunted. At exactly 11 p.m., just as she was about to turn off her burner phone, a text came in from an unknown number. "You think you can play clean in a dirty house? We know who you are, little IAD mole." The message made her blood run cold. Less than a minute later, she heard the sound of glass breaking from the back of the apartment. She immediately rolled onto the floor, taking a defensive position. 2 shadows leaped over the back fence into the small yard. "Find her. Don't let her get away," a man's voice ordered. Ray crawled near the back door and waited for the footsteps to get closer. As soon as one man passed the kitchen doorway, she slammed him in the neck with the butt of her gun. The man collapsed without a sound. The second man heard the movement and fired twice toward the kitchen. Bullets tore through the thin drywall, sending plaster dust flying. Ray scrambled toward the front room, threw open the window, and dropped into the dark alleyway. Her team's civilian patrol car was supposed to be on standby a few blocks away, but she couldn't contact them. Her phone was still on the kitchen table. She ran silently between the narrow alleys, then stopped in front of a small community center. Pops, the elderly night watchman who knew her as the local canner, opened the side door. "Ray? Why you running this late?" Ray just whispered, "Pops, please, kill all the lights. Don't come out. There are people looking for me." The old man nodded, no more questions asked. Ray hid in the back storage room, holding her breath. Outside, she heard a car stop. "Check the community center. I bet she ran in here." Ray gripped her gun tightly. She knew if they found her, this could be the end. But then, from somewhere, the distant sound of a siren grew closer. The men chasing her panicked. "Back off, quick. There's a patrol car coming." Their footsteps faded away. Ray only dared to come out several minutes later. The old watchman looked at her worried. "Child, who are you really?" Ray looked at him with a tired smile. "Just someone looking for a little justice, Pops." The dirty chain revealed. The next morning, Ray contacted Lieutenant Price from a rundown 24-hour internet cafe. Lieutenant, they know who I am. Are you safe? For now. But we have to move fast. If Deputy Chief Donovan is really behind this, I can help get bigger proof. Don't be reckless, Hernandez. We're assembling a special task force. Wait for orders. But Ray couldn't just wait. She had already obtained the audio recordings from Harding's phone, which the IAD team had seized. As she listened, there was one voicemail from someone whose voice was chillingly familiar. Don't worry, just send the collection to the usual account. I'll handle the small-time vendors. Just don't let it leak to the press. Ray played the message over and over. She knew that voice. It was Deputy Chief Donovan. With that proof, she decided to act on her own. She knew Price would reprimand her, but time was not on their side. The final step. The next night, Ray went undercover again. This time, not as a canner, but as a night shift janitor at police headquarters. She got access using a key card from an officer whose life she had saved in the field years ago. She walked down the long, empty hallways. CCTV cameras rotated slowly in the corners. But she already knew every camera's blind spot. She entered the internal finance office, opened a filing cabinet with a duplicate key, and found several transfer ledgers. The names of the recipients made her chest tighten. It wasn't just Donovan. Several other ranking officers were also receiving payoffs from the market security funds. As she was photographing the documents with a small camera, the room lights suddenly flashed on. I had a feeling you'd be this reckless, Hernandez. A large figure appeared in the doorway. Deputy Chief Donovan, in full uniform, a gun on his hip. His eyes were cold, his lips forming a thin smile. Ambitious young cops like you always forget one thing, he said quietly, stepping closer. In this institution, truth belongs to whoever is in power. And you're just a pawn. Ray didn't flinch. She kept her gaze steady. If a pawn can take down a king, I'm willing to be sacrificed, sir. Donovan gave a short laugh. You've got nerve. He slowly raised his pistol, aiming it at Ray's chest. But before he could pull the trigger, the door was thrown open again. Drop your weapon, Chief. Lieutenant Price entered with several armed IAD officers. They had been monitoring Ray's movements since the afternoon. Apparently, Ray had managed to send a distress signal from a hidden button on her watch. Donovan was stunned and tried to resist, but a warning shot made him surrender. Hernandez, you're crazy. But you're incredible, Price said, clapping her on the shoulder. The storm. That dawn, Newark was still shrouded in a thin, chemical-smelling fog. The damp air clung to the asphalt and the brick facades of the tenements. In an IAD-safe house, Ray sat alone on a small balcony, staring at a cup of cold coffee. Her eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. The arrest of Deputy Chief Donovan should have been the end. But in reality, it was just the beginning of a bigger storm. In the last 2 days, the media had started reporting on the dirty cop scandal at the market, arrested thanks to an undercover officer. But strangely, Ray's name was never mentioned. Price had ordered her to stay off the grid for her own safety. But that morning, when she turned on the small TV in the living room, she heard a news report that made her blood boil. According to a police source, the incident at headquarters involving a high-ranking official is related to an internal administrative violation. There is currently no hard evidence of widespread corruption involving senior staff. Ray slammed the remote onto the table. Administrative violation? They're insane. They're trying to whitewash it. She paced the small room. All the evidence was clear, the recordings, the documents, the money transfers. But as usual, as soon as a case touched someone powerful, it started to get buried. A few hours later, Lieutenant Price arrived. He looked older than usual, with dark circles under his eyes and a heavy voice. Ray, you have to stay calm. The ethics board is asking us to hold off on releasing the additional evidence. Hold off, Lieutenant? That means they want to cover it up. I know. But if you go rogue, they can flip this on you. They can say you went outside the chain of command, even fabricated evidence. Ray looked at him with a bitter expression. So we just let them clean up their own names? Price let out a long sigh. Sometimes, to clean up the mud, you have to wait for the water to settle. But Ray didn't want to wait. She knew every hour that passed meant evidence could disappear and witnesses could be silenced. Plan in the shadows. That night, Ray opened her laptop again. She still had copies of all the data on a backup flash drive. She knew the only way to get the truth out was to leak it to the public. But not just randomly. She contacted someone through an encrypted chat. Ray, I have data on systemic corruption within the NYPD, but it needs to be released with visual proof. User, who is this? Ray, just call me a witness. The person was Marcus, a young, independent blogger known for breaking big, risky stories. Ray had been monitoring Marcus for a long time. He wasn't a corporate journalist. He was an idealist and stubborn. They agreed to meet the next night at a gritty, all-night diner near the bus terminal. The diner meeting. Rain was pouring down that night. Ray arrived wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. The diner was almost empty, just 2 other customers. Marcus was already sitting in a corner booth with a laptop and a small camera. Ray sat across from him without small talk and placed the flash drive on the table. It's all in there. Money transfers, audio recordings, even the video of the arrest. Marcus looked at her seriously. If this is real, you realize what the risk is, right? I know. But if the truth just stays hidden, it's the same as a lie. Marcus opened the first file. His expression changed immediately. He saw the video of Donovan signing transfer slips and heard the crystal clear audio. Send it to the usual account. Don't let it leak to the press. He closed the laptop slowly. I promise this will get out. But we have to be careful. They're definitely watching you by now. Ray nodded. I've been ready from the start. But without them realizing it, from a distance, 2 men in a sedan were watching the diner. One of them spoke into a small radio. Target has made contact. Awaiting orders. Chase in the rain. As soon as the meeting ended, Ray split from Marcus. But she had only walked a few yards when she heard a car engine accelerating behind her. Headlights pinned her against the brick wall. Stop, a voice yelled from the car. Ray immediately sprinted into a narrow alley. A gunshot cracked the air, making residents yell and slam their doors. Ray ducked, vaulted over a low chain-link fence, and disappeared into a dense maze of tenement buildings. She hid behind a wet, graffiti-covered wall, her breath ragged. The rain fell harder. From the end of the alley, 2 men chased her, guns raised. They weren't street thugs. Their movements were too trained. One of them yelled, "Donovan got caught because of you. Now it's your turn to disappear." Ray decided to draw them out. She kicked a metal trash can, making a loud clatter, then moved to the right side of the alley. As soon as one man got close, she dropped down from a low fire escape and kicked him hard in the shoulder. The man fell, his gun skittering across the pavement. The other man fired twice, but the bullets missed. Ray ran through the wet alley, jumped onto an old motorcycle parked in front of a closed bodega, hotwired it, and sped off toward the main road. The black sedan chased her, swerving through puddles and honking traffic. The city lights reflected on the slick asphalt, making the scene look like something out of an action movie. But Ray had a plan. Under a highway overpass, Marcus was waiting with his car. He opened the door. Ray ditched the bike, leaped into the passenger seat, and they sped off toward the city limits. The truth broadcast. A few hours later, in an empty house in Patterson, Marcus stared intently at his laptop screen. He was uploading the video and documents to a network of national media outlets. If this signal holds, in 5 minutes, the news will be on every major portal, he said. Ray sat on the floor, staring at the blank screen. As soon as this video is out, they'll hunt us down relentlessly. Marcus managed a small smile. Yeah, but if everyone knows, they can't silence it anymore. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the upload finished. The video, titled "Internal Corruption, a Voice from Inside the Uniform," went live on multiple platforms. Within minutes, the topic went viral. The hashtags "Clean Up the Force" and "Speak the Truth" started trending nationally. But not long after, the power in the house cut out. Marcus looked toward the window. Looks like they already found this location. Ray took a deep breath. We have to split up. You take the backup copies to another media outlet. I'll draw their attention. Are you crazy? That's suicide. If we both get caught, no one can continue this. Trust me, Marcus. Marcus hesitated, then nodded grimly. All right. But promise me one thing. You get out of this alive. Ray smiled faintly. I'll try. Escape to dawn. Ray left the house, moving quickly, slipping between the shadows of the trees. The black sedans were already lined up at the end of the street, their red and blue lights flashing silently. She knew this wasn't an official IAD operation. This was a shadow op, run by people still loyal to Donovan. Without a second thought, she ran toward the small patch of woods behind the neighborhood. Her footsteps made noise on the wet ground. In the distance, she heard tracker dogs barking. Ray kept running until she found the Passaic River. She slid down the muddy bank and waded into the cold, chest-deep water, hiding behind the large roots of an old tree. Holding her breath, she watched flashlight beams dance across the water's surface. One of the men shouted, "She can't be far. Find her." But as they split up, Ray slowly submerged, swam to the other side of the river, and disappeared into the darkness. A new morning. The sun was just starting to rise when Ray emerged onto a small highway on the edge of the city. Her clothes were soaked, her hair matted, but her eyes were still sharp. She saw a newspaper box at a small gas station. The headline, "Massive Scandal in Police Dept Exposed. Data from Female Undercover Officer Goes Viral." She breathed a sigh of relief. The truth was out. However, beneath the main headline, there was another small story in the corner. Identity of undercover officer still a mystery. Police department will form task force to protect her. Ray smiled grimly. She knew protect didn't always mean safe. But for the first time, she felt her struggle hadn't been in vain. She looked toward the sun, just starting to peek over the distant skyscrapers. They might have the uniforms, but the people have eyes, she muttered quietly. 3 days after the news exploded, the country changed. On TV, in diners, on social media, everyone was talking about the mysterious female officer who dared to expose corruption in her own department. But behind all the noise, Ray lived in the shadows. She moved from place to place. Sometimes sleeping in abandoned buildings, sometimes in the back of a small church. Her hair was now cut short, making her harder to recognize. In her hand, she always had one thing she never let go of, the flash drive with the original evidence and her personal notes. That night, she hid in the old apartment of an elderly widow named Mrs. Petrov, who had known her since her days undercover in the market. "Ray, you must eat. Not just coffee. Your face is so pale, Mrs. Petrov said, bringing her a plate of rice and beans. Ray smiled faintly. Thank you, Mrs. P. I'm okay. This country is strange, child. The evil ones get protected, and the honest ones get hunted, Mrs. Petrov mumbled softly, looking at her with pity. Ray was silent. She knew the old woman was right. Back in the city, Lieutenant Price was being grilled by an internal ethics board. He stood in front of the High Council of Police Commissioners, who were reviewing his team's actions. You authorized an officer to conduct an operation without written approval, causing irreparable damage to the institution's name, one official said coldly. Price answered calmly. What's damaged isn't the institution's name, sir. It's the integrity of the men in it. If this institution is afraid of the truth, we've already lost the fight. The room fell silent. Several board members just looked at each other. They couldn't directly punish him because public support was overwhelmingly on Ray's side. But the political pressure was coming from all directions. Meanwhile, outside police headquarters, hundreds of college students were protesting. They carried signs that read, "Clean the institution, protect Officer RA, and truth can't be silenced." But on the other side, many were angry. Several high-ranking officials felt threatened, calling Ray a traitor in a uniform. A bullet at dusk. That afternoon, Ray was walking alone along the edge of the abandoned rail yards, trying to get a signal to contact Lieutenant Price. She hadn't heard from him in weeks. The orange sky reflected off puddles of standing water. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and rust. Suddenly, the sound of dirt bikes echoed in the distance. 2 bikes were moving slowly toward her. Ray's instincts immediately went on high alert. She lowered her phone, watching them closely. "All alone, little mole," one of them called out mockingly. Ray took a step back. "Who are you?" "Just the guys sent to clean up the mess you made." Before she could respond, the first shot was fired. Ray immediately dove into a shallow ditch by the tracks. The bullet missed, slamming into a concrete pylon. She pulled her gun from her bag, firing twice in return. One of the attackers fell, the bike tumbling over. The other one sped off toward the main road. Ray ran to the fallen bike, checking the attacker's identity. Pinned inside his black jacket, she found a small, concealed police badge. Ray froze. They weren't thugs. They were cops. The last meeting. That night, Ray managed to contact Lieutenant Price on a secure line. "Lieutenant, I was just attacked. From the badge I found, they're our own people." The voice on the other end sounded heavy. "I know, Ray. There's a faction within the department still loyal to Donovan. They want revenge. So what's our move now?" "I've sent the complete report to the governor, but the situation is sensitive. You have to stay hidden until you get an official summons." Ray was silent for a long time. "I'm tired, Lieutenant. Tired of hiding, tired of being hunted, tired of being attacked by the very people who are supposed to be on my side." The lieutenant's voice softened. "I know, kid. But you've done something huge. Believe me, this sacrifice won't be for nothing." Before hanging up, Price said one last sentence that made Ray's chest ache. "If, one day, you can't wear that uniform anymore, remember that the truth doesn't need a badge." A shock in the night. 3 days later, a shocking news report appeared on television. Deputy Chief Frank Donovan was pronounced dead in his holding cell, reportedly from a sudden heart attack. Ray stared at the screen, expressionless. She knew what this meant. The case would be slowly closed. In her heart, she knew Donovan didn't die of a heart attack. He was silenced, so he couldn't talk. But at the same time, the media broadcasted other news. The state government was officially forming a police reform task force, inspired by the courage of a female officer who refused to bow to injustice. Ray couldn't hold back her tears this time. She cried, not out of sadness, but because, finally, her fight meant something. A morning at the Liberty Street Market. Several months later, the atmosphere at the Liberty Street Market was different. No more arrogant cops, no more frightened vendors. Everything was calm, as it should be. Among the crowd, a young woman with short hair and simple clothes walked by, carrying a shopping bag. She smiled at the vendors, who looked at her with curiosity. "Hey, isn't that Ray?" called out the vegetable vendor. Ray turned and smiled faintly. "Been a while, Mrs. P. Thank God. Ever since you exposed that mess, this market has been peaceful." "No more shakedowns," the woman said, her voice thick with emotion. Ray just nodded, bought some vegetables, and walked away. She no longer wore a uniform, no longer carried a gun, but her eyes still held the same quiet resolve. A quiet end. That evening, Ray sat on the bank of the Passaic River, the same one that had been her escape route. The evening breeze blew gently. She looked into the distance, then wrote something in a small notebook she always carried. Justice isn't about winning or losing. It's about choosing to stand in the right place, even when everyone else tells you to sit down. In the distance, she heard the sound of children playing. The sky slowly turned orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. Ray closed her notebook, looked at the sky, and smiled. Maybe she was no longer part of the institution she once fought for. But in her heart, she knew she was still upholding her oath, to find the truth, no matter the cost. Epilogue. A few months later, Ray's case study was being taught at the police academy. No one knew where she was now, but many believed she was still working quietly for the city. Not with a uniform, but with a conscience. And in a corner of the Liberty Street Market, on a small brick wall near the